Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here. Before we get into the podcast, I just want to do a quick shout out for BMT tax depreciation reports. Now, for my two rental properties, I've had a BMT tax depreciation report done on those. And at tax time, I can get up to $25,000 worth of tax deductions. That's a lot of money. And for your property owners, would you believe a lot of them don't know the savings that they can be getting? And every rental property can still have some type of tax depreciation. So get in contact with the guys at BMT, talk to them about how you as a property manager and a property management agency can be serving your clients in Australia about getting the maximum tax deductions for their rental properties. Take care. Hi everyone, it is Darren Hunter here, and this is our PM Power podcast, and we've really just made this especially for property managers. We really didn't want to get into growth because we've got some great BDM podcasts and we've got PM growth experts, but we wanted to do something that's just focused on property managers. And I'm just going to welcome today Kelley Seaton. Hi, Kelley.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
And Kelley is from the Leasing Network, which is based on the Central Coast in New South Wales. And Kelley has been a property manager for, not as long as myself, but we're getting there. So you came in the industry in 1994. So how many years experience does that give you, Kelley?
That'd be 26, I think.
Yeah.
Long time.
Long time, but that's cool. And I think you're telling me about your year so far. What was the word that you used? Was it wild ride? It's been a wild ride. I think you've had some crazy things happening, haven't you? Well, just give us in a nutshell. What are some of the crazy things that have happened to you just this year?
This year we are on fire, literally. So we've actually had two fires. One happened in January and the other one happened in July, the last 31st of July. So but yeah, we've actually been on fire this year. It's been a very challenging wild ride.
Wow. I know that I've seen your ups and downs. I'm seeing some of those crazy photos with the fires that you have had to deal with. And they're the sort of things, I think if you're in the job long enough, you're going to come across this stuff. And just wacky things that you never ever thought were possible. And so just moving right along, I just want to also give a shout out to everybody. We've just released a book called, it's our PM Power book. It's actually 101 time and stress management tips. To get it, just go to pmpowerkeys.com. That's pmpowerkeys.com. You get the link in there. And look, we are giving the book away for free if you're just happy to pay for postage for us to get it out to you, because we're dealing with people from Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. So we're just wanting to give the book away for free. So go to that link there and get your copy of the book. We're also going to be loading some other time management, communication, stress management training in there as well. But go and take a look at that. But Kelley, I just wanted to focus today, and I think we had a chat about this. I want this podcast to be focused around the big issues, the big pain points, something that's highly useful to our property managers out there. And today I want to talk about communication. And when we spoke together some days ago, planning this podcast session together and talking about, hey, what do you want to talk about? The word effective communication came up. And we're going to divide this discussion into two parts. We're going to talk about the questioning system that you have in place before you sign up a new owner. And then once you've signed them up, the communication strategies that you've got in place to induct them and bed them down as an owner with your company being the Leasing Network. So let's get started there Kelley, and just let's talk about your questioning process with prospective landlords. So you haven't signed them up yet. And we know that you're doing the BDM work. You are actually part of the BDM club with IGT. So as a business owner, you're being the BDM. You're also a property manager. You're managing stuff. So you are a very, very busy lady. But let's just talk about your questioning process and let's walk through that. So firstly, why do you feel that effective questioning and communication is really important at the listing presentation? Why so early?
Yep, I think so early we need to ask, I think we need to ask questions all the way along, but so early we need to identify the client themselves, what experience they have had in the past, if they have had experience before, if they're a first-time investor or if they're a seasoned investor. We need to know basically their ground level and where they're starting at before they come into our office.
Okay, so why is that important though, Kelley? So, I mean, there's a lot of property managers out there, you know, they'll sign up, you need a property manager, let's sign you up and let's get on the way. Why, after your years and years and years and years and years in property management, why is this questioning so important? What are you trying to get to the bottom of, and what are you going to use it for?
Yep. So we need to find out their history so that we can see if they have had any perhaps pain points in the past. Are they a client who's come from another agency that's failed them, or are they a new investor who's been watching a current affair and hearing all the horror stories and things like that? So we need to identify which channel they're coming from and how to understand them best so that we can actually do the best that we can to service and cover and make sure that we are effectively across the board with those pain points that they've had in the past, or the pain points that they're seeing on the TV show.
Let's talk about that. So you talked about, you know, which channel they're on. So let's dial channel one, and let's say that you've got a prospective client that's never had a rental property before. Yep. What are the typical, just let's run through all the type of pain points that are typical with this type of client. What are the sort of questions that you would ask to get to find out your answers there? What are the, you know, what are the pain points generally? Let's list them out.
Yeah, I think if they've not been an investor before, they are literally seeing the news. So they're seeing tenants trash the property is normally their number one. If they're seeing that on a current affair, or they're seeing arrears, they're worried that the tenant's just going to stop paying rent. They're more worried about the property itself. Yeah. From that perspective, because they don't know, they haven't had that experience with somebody who can look after it. So they're just worried about what they're seeing in the media. Yeah,
correct. And there's a lot in there. I mean, we know those shows at 6:30 at night, A Current Affair on Channel 9, or, you know, I don't think Today Tonight is running anymore. I'm not sure. But, you know, these people here are seeing the horror stories out there. And of course, the media shows all the bad stuff. Yeah. They don't talk about the correctly managed properties. So these people do have an incorrect picture, don't they?
They do.
And you and I know, I mean, I was in the job frontline property manager 15 years. You've easily covered, you know, that base as well. And you and I know, you do your job right, you're hardly ever going to see a problem. Yeah. You know, you know, very rarely, a good property manager very rarely ever has to evict. And thank goodness for that, because we're not into evicting people. So, you know, finding out, of course, if the owner is scared of the tenant from hell, the property being trashed, getting a bad tenant, or not getting their mortgage paid. What's important? Why do you want to know exactly what their pain point is? What are you going to do with that?
Yeah, we're pretty much going to only focus on their pain point. So just say, for example, if they're not concerned about rental arrears, we're actually not even going to talk about that, because that's not a concern to them at all. It might be down the bottom of their list at item 15, whereas we're only going to focus on their top, say, 3 concerns, so that therefore we're addressing exactly what that client wants, because every client's different. So you might find that this client might only want to talk about that, but then you've got the other clients from the other channel that have had a bad property manager in the past or whatever. They're going to have a different set of concerns and pain points. So we're purely going to focus on based on each individual client. So if we find out...
I see these pain points as stepping stones, that they might seem like a barrier, but once you discuss the pain point and how you can supply an answer to that, then it's actually gaining trust, gaining connection, and getting it closer to them wanting to use you, right? Because it's just building trust all the way along.
Absolutely. Yep, definitely.
Well done.
If we can deliver on that, yep.
So we talked about channel 1, which is a new client that's never had a property managed before. So they really don't know what's going to go on, and they've just got this weird and wacky ideas that the media's fed them. But let's now talk about an owner that is experienced with rental properties. They've had 1 or 2 rental properties in the past. They've had 1 or 2 property managers in the past. I think you and I agree, we've got a different situation here. They are educated. They've been down the road. So what are the main pain points? Because the dialogue is changing here, right?
completely changing. So the pain point for them, because they've already experienced a horrible time, the most of the pain points that we find is effective communication is number one. Number two, we find it's connecting with their property manager. And number three, we find it's just consistency across the board. So those are the three things that we've done, and we've surveyed our clients that have come on board with us, our new business clients, as to what's gone wrong with the client, with the agency prior, so that we can make certain that those things are not going to go wrong with us. So they would get given our property owner's handbook as well as the other channel, but they would get given that, and that would step out everything on how we work. But if we find out what their pain points were before, we can target specifically what they want.
Okay, well, let's just change the scenario up, and I'm going to throw a curly one in here for you. So you're sitting in front of an owner that's had to move away from his family home because of a job transfer. So he's what we call a default or an accidental landlord. What are the things you're going to be looking for there as potential pain points and potential issues? How does your questioning change with this type of client?
Yeah, that type of client's an emotional client already because it's their home. So that client, we find, is we actually kind of cotton ball them a little bit more, because they really do have their heart on the line with looking after the property and making certain that it's not going to get trashed. So I guess we just have to run down our onboarding process with them and make certain that we ask them every single question that we can to nut down exactly what their needs are.
Okay, well done. So you're looking specifically the issues surrounding that type of client, correct? And also you're nutting out fair wear and tear?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a property guide for a landlord, for every landlord that comes on to us. And we say to them, okay, this is our property guide and preparation guide, if you like to call it that. It's a little checklist, and it says, these are the things that you need to do before we actually have some keys to your property and start marketing. So in there will be recommendations of things, like maybe they might need a fresh coat of paint, or, you know, all of those sort of things and suggestions that we would have to make certain that when the property comes on with us, it is ready to go, as neat as a pin. There's going to be no discrepancies or anything like that, especially if they've lived in it, you know, because if they've lived in it, they really do have, they do have their heart making certain that they might want to move back to that property. If they're moving into state, for example, they may have every intention on coming back to that home. So they want it to be like it was when they left it, even though it might be 7 years later, but they still want it. They remember that they left it looking in pristine condition, and that's how they want it back.
Okay, well, you and I know that that's setting us up for a potential war.
Yeah.
So, you know, what are the words that you use to maybe pop their bubble, and just talk about the real world? How do you condition them with your questioning or your prodding to really, what's the right thing that you need to say to them so we're not setting us up for failure later on?
Yeah, I think it's just about giving them the process, you know, and making certain that they understand. We're all about educating the client. So it's a matter of setting things up from the beginning and making certain that they know how we're going to work in the management of their property. And that might mean talking about scheduled maintenance. And sometimes that might involve, you know, outdoor quarterly cleanup, or, you know, raking of leaves, or those sort of things. That is in addition to what the tenant's going to do. But if we can make certain that we've got all of those things planned out in the management of their property, then that's going to help them.
Okay.
You know,
what if you start hearing words like, you know, they're concerned about the floorboards getting scratched, or they want the oven kept really clean, or, they start getting a little bit precious about things. You know, what's your dialogue?
The floorboards will get scratched. Tick, yes. The oven will get dirty. Yep. So absolutely, those things will happen. We tell them as it is. We're not going to sugarcoat it, because if we sugarcoat it, then later on, we've got a lot of work to do, you know. So we actually do tell them, yes, it's your home, but the tenants are going to look after it to a different standard that you look after it. We are going to give them our guidelines for how to look after it and everything, of course. But yeah, there is going to be some changes when you come back, including
all right, well scratches. Done. Okay, well, let's now move on to another type of owner that's come to you, a DIY landlord. He's been managing his own property very proudly for a number of years, and even when he puts his property on Gumtree or some free property management or property marketing portal or whatever. He's always managed himself. He's very proudly done that, but for whatever reason now, maybe he's getting a little bit old to want to manage the property anymore. Maybe the legislation compliance is getting too complex. It's too much of a headache. He's now brought you the property. He's managed it forever and a day himself. Walk me through what are the issues you're looking for? What are the pain points you're looking for? What are the questions that you would have for this type of owner?
Have alarm bells ringing already?
You like my questions?
This type of client,
this stuff.
No, you're just throwing it at me, but I love it because I'd love, it's fine. This type of landlord scares me. I'm going to be completely honest. They just think they've done it all before and they know everything best. So it's quite interesting when you have a self-managing landlord come along. I love when they come along. We literally go through our property owner's handbook with this client. We go through our frequently asked questions. They get so much information on legislation and fair trading checklists and all of this. We have to educate these people because they've done it all their way. And it's often not the best way at all. It's often the worst way. So it's a matter of us introducing to them all of our service standards and things like that to make certain that they work how we want to work because we're managing the property now, not them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is really, really good. Okay.
Yeah. It's about processes with that client. You know, it really is about processing every step of the way because we're going to do it so different to how they did. And I think this sort of a client is the hardest when they've got a tenant in play and you're taking on the tenant from hell sometimes too, because let's face it, why do they not want to manage it themselves anymore? They've got this tenant that they perhaps can't control, and now they need a real estate agent to step in who knows the rules, who can control them. So alarm bells ring when someone says to me, I've managed my property myself. I just go, oh, great. And then I move forward with the questions for that specific client. Yep.
Well done. That's good. And I think, you talking like this, Kelley, only a person with lots of experience understands. Yeah. We only have to get our fingers burned so many times before we realize that not all business is good business or we have to use caution. So, all right, moving on. Now, you want another client? That gives you another type. You ready? So you are a property management only agency, the Leasing Network on the Central Coast. And but you do have relationships with real estate salespeople out there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So your favorite real estate salesperson, referral person gives you a call on the phone and says, Kelley, I've got this property with a person that, has been trying to sell it. I've had it listed, but I don't know how long. I can't find a buyer at the moment. The market sucks. The owner needs to get some money. They want to look at renting it out until the market comes good again, where they're going to place it back on the sales, whether it's going to be 6 months or 12 months. Can you come out and meet the owner?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Happens all the time.
Yep, cool. Alrighty. So what are some of the issues, pain points, problems? What are some of the questions you're now going to put into motion here for potential problems that could happen later on?
Yeah, that client just wants money because they're in that situation where they need it. They're now desperate because they need to obviously lease the property because it's not selling. So in that situation, we normally go out with the sales agent. And I'm talking, this probably happens at least once a week or maybe once every 10 days. So we go out with them and we make certain that they're with us because they know their client better than what we know them. So we can kind of bypass all of that history bit for a minute and just get straight into, this is the steps that we need to take right now today. Here's the agreement, sign the line, we're going to do A, B, C, D, E and get it moving. So with that client, they don't really have any pain points. They're just annoyed that it hasn't sold. So with them, we just say, well, this is the process. And they kind of just go, okay, you're telling the story, and they do flow and go along with what we're recommending because they do trust we're doing, being property management only. They trust that that's our area of expertise. So probably can't answer it for the mixed business. But
that's all right. Well, I want to throw another one. Let's say I am that potential owner. You're interviewing me. I've got the property that sell. I can't. Mm-hmm. Kelley, look, I really still want to sell the property, but can we find a tenant without any lease? Can we just have it on an open agreement? or on a monthly or a periodic agreement, whatever you want to call it. Can I just keep my sign up the front? And I'll talk to the salesperson. We're looking at hopefully to have a open inspection at least once a week. And I want you to get me a good tenant.
No. I think you need to go to the agent down the road. In that scenario, I would say to you that it's best to just refrain from the sales market right now. You've already experienced that it's not working. So let's just throw it on the rental market for a fixed locked lease for 6 months, and then we can go from there. There's nothing to stop them from listing it again the minute that you start advertising and putting a tenant in anyway, realistically. But I would have them avoid doing both. And I would not take it on the market as well as tenanting it for now, because it's going to say, I would say to them, you're not going to find a tenant. If you've got a sale sign sitting out the front, someone's not going to want to do that. So I would encourage them to just literally have it on the rental market. I'd ask
it's either sales or it's either rentals, but not both.
Yeah, correct. And the sales guy that's referred them to our office already knows that. He knows he's going to get the business back. We only do property management. So he knows it's not going to go anywhere else. It's going straight back to that client. So I guess that's the difference with being a property management only business. Whereas if we were a traditional office and we had a sales arm too, well, that could slide sideways into that sales department, But for us, we just say, let's lock it in 6 months exclusive. Let's go. We'll get you the income that you need. It'll be tenanted in 12 days. And we will call the shots.
Okay. And as you said, the owner is after money. So what if the home, does need quite a bit of repair work or something like that? What's your discussion in your words around maintenance and repairs?
Yeah. So if it's a sales client, I would hope that the sales guys already ironed those out, because you would want to have it looking in pristine condition to try and sell. But obviously, just pretending it's not, we would actually make some recommendations and suggestions to them. We would then get some quotations and say, look, for as little as $200, do you realize you can do A, B, and C? And that's going to be of more benefit to you if you do that. And you're going to have better not so much long-term tenants, because they probably don't want long-term, but they're going to have perhaps more tenants because it looks better, or things like that. The one thing I find sometimes with those sort of clients is they don't want to spend money because they're already behind the 8 ball, So that's the trickiest part, is we need to try and educate them so we spend a little bit of money, but we're going to make a bigger gain. And that's the sort of thing we try and leverage out with them, so that they understand that, yes, they need to pay for advertising and marketing or a virtual tour or whatever, but this is going to be the benefit to them later, because it's going to be a higher rental yield, lesser days on market, which is obviously going to give them more money in their pocket faster. So it's a little bit tricky, but we do need to explain that process so that they do understand that, they might have to spend a little bit to get a greater gain.
Yep. All right, I'm going to give you another one. You ready?
Yep.
Your real estate person's back on the phone again, your salesperson. Let's call him Bill. Bill is on the phone, and he says, Kelley, I've got a big client that I work with, and he regularly comes to me, and he's a developer. And he's bought a couple of blocks of land that he's going to flag for development later on when the economic conditions warrant it. But there's a couple of really crappy houses on it, and they're very run down. I mean, he got a bargain basement price. But Kelley, I need you to look after this guy. And can you please go and sign him up and go and get him a good tenant and rent out the property? What are some of the issues, pain points, problems? What are some of the things that we really got to look out for here? And what are some of the the issues that we need to navigate through our questioning that could turn into real complications later on?
Yeah. It needs to have no risks. So we would say to the client, just say the back balcony is about to fall off or something like that. It would have to be for us to take it on, regardless of if you're having so many properties, and it could grow into 50 properties later. If there's going to be a reason for a risk or an accident that we're going to be involved in, we're not going to take it on. So he has to fix that risk. We can't. We just literally can't.
I think that's a good comment, because I think 10 or 15 years ago, we were in a different situation, weren't we? We probably would, okay, we'll do the management. We don't like doing this, but we'll just deal with it. But now things have changed. There is no compromise now on risk, is there?
There's too much litigation going on. There really is. So we need to put ourselves as an agency in the forefront of that decision. So yeah, I think for most of those clients, we could get around a few things, but they will get a little list from us that says these are the items that we need to address before anything further happens.
So you'd be working with them to a minimum level, right?
Yeah.
To a minimum level. Well, you've got to work out what that is. But of course, the property has to comply with your Residential Tenancies Act.
Yep.
It needs to have legislation. Otherwise, the tenant's going to have us really quickly in a tribunal or a court wanting compensation. So it just gets bad all round, which means you start getting your commission interfered with. Or I've even seen here in South Australia, we had properties defected and the rents very commonly drop by 50%. So down goes your income as well. So anyway, okay. All right. You ready for another type? Okay. So a gentleman rings up and says, hey, Kelley, my mum and dad lived in our family home like 40 years. I grew up there. My brothers and sisters, we grew up there. We moved out ages ago. Mum and dad have now passed on. And we want to rent out the home. And we need a really, really good rent. So have you got that situation pictured?
Yep. We're going to have
what are the communication points around this? What are the stress points or the pain points we've got to look out for? What are the potential issues in that type of scenario that we need to navigate?
So I think that client, we're going to do a little mini renovation, I think, almost, because if mum and dad lived there for a long time, we may need to bring in a bit of a handyman team and say, we're going to do a quick paint out, new flooring or whatever. But that's the sort of client that we would literally say to them, these are the suggestions and recommendations that we'd have for you. And they will have an emotional attachment being mum and dad's house, but we're going to quickly turn them into an investor and to think like an investor and educate them like an investor and make certain that they can have everything they want. But to have everything they want, they just might need to do a little bit of tweaking to bring it up to 2020 standard, not 19.
I agree. I think there's two issues. And my experience was two issues: decor, outdated, but also repairs. I remember a situation with it was an older home. It was in Loxton of South Australia. And it was just this really old vintage looking cottage. The lady would live in there 50 years. She's now gone. And what I realized until afterwards is that house was only used to one lady, elderly lady living in it. Now I've rented it out. I've got a family moving in. And I think the house just didn't know what hit it. Suddenly, all these things were breaking down. The pipework was breaking down. It was getting blocked. It's like the house couldn't handle it. And I realized that the house was only used to a level of use, a level of wear and tear. A whole new family moves in, and it was like, oh, the house literally was falling apart. And so there was that issue too. So I think for people out there, certainly the decor is at 1950s, 1960s decor with missionary brown or this musk pink in the bathroom or something like that. You've got to update, but it's also the repairs. Do you know if the home is in a good state of repair? It may not be, particularly if pensioners were living it for many, many years. There may be stuff that will only come out after a new tenant moves in. So these are the things you've definitely got to look out for. So Kelley, I think that was a really good discussion points around prospective clients. Let's now move to the other side of things. We've now got the business. We've now got the sign management. Where are we going now? What's the next steps that you put in place with your induction of this client to bring them on board and bed them down as a client of the Leasing Network? What's your process?
All right. So we do go through pretty much a property owner's handbook. We do go through all of the frequently asked questions, legislation. We go through communication. We go through the standards of the property. We go through all of our processes. So that might be it from starting and leasing right through to the management side of things. We would step them out in lots of different aspects. We would talk to them about how the inspections are conducted and all of this sort of stuff. So if they come at that level, we talk about the whole leasing section. We kind of split our portfolio into two, saying leasing and management, so that we've got two different jobs happening at the time. So we'd step them through all of the first section. Then when they get into the management section, we talk about all of our service standards and things like that. So it's very different when they're already on board. But before we get to that stage, we need to find out a lot more about them as a client as well, because every client's different. So they're on board. We need to make certain what sort of client are they. We do a little bit of disc profiling, if you like, almost to call it that, so we can work out, well, what sort of client is this? Do they just want concise bullet point answers, or do they want the fluffy story? So that's the sort of thing we try and work out. We put them in our database, in our property management software. We categorize them as to what sort of client they are, so that communication preferences from the start to finish are the same.
Okay, so let's just talk about that. So you said you're using like a basic disc profile, which talks about, people that want direct communication. I'm one of those. Don't get into fluff with me. You've got people that, want to talk a lot, people that do want all the fluff. You've got people that, so they just want the numbers. So tell me, tell me about that. How do you segregate that in your property management software system? So, what are the various types of clients? Is there 4? Is there 5? Tell me about that. So what system do you have so you can categorize that client to get your communication right?
Yep, we just put, we use Property Me, so I'm sure there's all different sorts of programs, but we just put that in our alerts under the property, under the landlord, so that we can see exactly what sort of client this is. And so it literally has a DISC. We know exactly what those profiles are. They might be a blend of 2 profiles, but I think after you've had a 10-minute conversation with somebody, you know exactly what sort of client, or you can predict or anticipate which client they are. Some clients, I even say to them, have you done a disc profile? What are you? And they're like, oh, I'm an I. And I'm like, oh, great, you can have Hayley because, I'm not an I, but so we would literally write it down so we know exactly what sort of communication that they like, because no one wants to be on the phone for a long time if you're a bullet point person. Let's face it, you just want the 3 bullet points and you want to get out of there. So I just think if we can make certain that we're dealing with them how they want to be communicated with, they're going to love that, because that's how they are. And we need to understand what sort of client they are and adapt to that.
Yep. No, that's good. So let's talk about setting expectations. And one of the things we talked about before was dealing with calls and emails and communication. What sort of communication are you having with them? What discussion are you having around their expectations with calls and emails? What sort of, expectations are you laying down about how you operate? How do you do that?
Yeah, they get our service standards. Our service standards are very clear. And they say, if you want to be communicated by email, say, for example, our reply will be 24 hours. If you want to be communicated by phone, our reply will be, 2 hours. We try and do it less than that because everybody wants everything now, like before, So, but they would be told the ways of communication with our office is X, Y, Z. And these are the timeframes that we are going to reply to you. Now, one big thing with this is you cannot overpromise and under deliver. So you need to, if you say you're going to call them back within 2 hours, if they've left a message, you literally need to call them back within 2 hours, because if you don't, you've lost all their trust and you're back to square one. So it's a matter of us saying to them, these are the time frames that we're going to talk to you. This is how we're going to do it, and go from there. The one thing I'm finding now is people are really coming on board with text messaging. And I hate text messaging, because particularly for a property manager, if you're out of the office between this property and that property and someone texts you, you've already read it. By the time you get back, honestly, you've forgotten it. So I actually have a habit. If I get a text message, I screenshot and forward that to my email, because otherwise I'm going to forget that, So there's ways that we love doing things as well. But if the client loves text messaging, that's how we have to communicate with the client. Some clients are busy at work and they don't want to be disrupted by their property manager. But if they got a quick text saying, dear John, this is what happened today, John's just going to give you the thumbs up and come back, So it just depends. But we literally would tell them our service standards so that we meet their expectations and we deliver based on exactly what we've said we're going to do.
Okay. Oh, let's talk about after hours. Taking their calls after hours and on weekends. What's the expectation you give around your availability outside of hours?
All right, so I try not to. It's a little different for me because I'm the business owner as well. So I do not answer the phone outside of our office hours. If it rings twice, it's perhaps that they've rung our main office line and then they've rung my mobile. If it rings 3 times, I'll pick it up or I'll answer it. But at 2, I will listen to the voicemail and I will decide, is that an urgent matter or not? But yeah, they won't get a call back generally. They might get a quick text saying, you know, thanks for your call. I'm actually at kids sport. It's Saturday afternoon. Things are crazy. I've diarised to call you on Monday at 9 or 8:30 or whatever, you know. So we try and avoid it at all possible costs, because if we talk to that client at 7 o'clock at night this week, guess what time they're going to ring next week? They're going to ring at 7 o'clock at night next week, and the week after, and the week after. So we literally say, these are our office hours. You have to understand that, hey, you know what? I'm a mum. I've got a husband. I've got 2 children. And if you're going to ring me, you're going to hear screaming kids, dog barking, and all this other stuff. You don't want to hear all that. So they're respectful of that. If we are upfront with them, most people are respectful of that. And so sometimes, yeah, Friday night, it might get a message and I have to text back going, you know what, it's family time. I'm cooking spaghetti. Like, I really don't care that you need new turf is not affected tonight. We're doing spaghetti, you know. So yeah, I think if you lay down the rules, that they will follow the rules.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about your owner's portal. How do you communicate that to owners, and how, how do you connect them up to that so they're using that and getting access to easy information? How do you explain that?
Yeah. So number one for our office is transparency, and we literally run our business based on transparency. We have transparent business cards and whatnot. So it's quite cool. The portal, 24/7 access, we say to them, is live data. You can see everything. We invite them to the portal when they come on board. We've already explained the portal at the new business listing appointment and things like that. And I love the portal so that they can see, you know, if their rent's coming in next Tuesday, what's sitting there right now and things like that. So the portal is very advantageous for them. And the fact that they can just jump on whenever they want is great. But, you know, it's quite interesting because we can see in the back end when the owners do get on the portal and they don't get on there very often at all. So that's really, it's a compliment for us because they obviously trust what we're doing. And yeah, they don't use it as much as they should, but it's the fact that it's there and available and they feel like they've got a safety net because they can just check on you, you know, make sure you're doing the right thing without you knowing. But we can see. But anyway, we don't tell them we can see. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Property Owner's Handbook. Now, what's the sort of benefits you've had with using the handbook, getting that in place, which is your induction manual? What's some of the feedback that you've had from clients with that? How has it helped you?
Yeah, I think there's so much information in there because you don't always get time to go through every line when you're meeting face-to-face with them, or sometimes it's over Zoom or whatever. So I think the fact that they can see each section, you know, there's frequently asked questions. We always ask our clients, and we love it when they come to us with questions. We actually give them the handbook, but before that, in the listing part, we've actually given them a list of questions that they might like to ask any property manager that they're going to bring on board, because we know what our answers are to all of those questions. So if they ask that to somebody else, you know, they're not sure what they're going to get thrown at. So, but we ask all about those questions, and we talk about the legislation and just every item in that handbook is handy for them to have as a record, so that sometimes we do say, oh, that's in the handbook, you know, we did talk about that because it's in the handbook as well in chapter whatever, you know. So it's quite interesting that it is there for backup, if you like to call it that. We can say, well, here it is. They can read through it at their own leisure as well. And yeah, it's a bit of a backup to all of the processes and the systems that we have in place.
Well done. So just to shout out for everybody, if you're interested in the Property Owner's Handbook, we've only just created a newer version, revised it. We've got a very detailed, frequently asked questions. Just about every big question an owner would probably ever ask you, we've answered it in the handbook. We've got a second section, which is all a detailed checklist for the owner to get the property ready for rental. But the third part there is just detailed list of your services around what you do for your management process, the leasing process, and the whole purpose of that, so they can see the comprehensive nature of your work, so they don't fall into the rut of thinking all you do is collect rent and drink coffee. As you know, Kelley, there's a lot more to it than just that. So go to pmpowerkeys.com. I'll make sure there's a link in there. You can have a look at the handbook. You can actually purchase it and download it as a Microsoft Word document. So that means you just amend it to your legislation. You can add your own brand, change it to your office practices and really make it yours. And then that's going to become your working property owner's handbook. We've got an Australian version and we've got a New Zealand version too, because the dialogue in those is quite different. So Kelley, I just want to say a big thank you. I think this was a great episode. We really got into some really good property management nuts and bolts there, a great discussion, really showcasing your experience. And I want to say thank you so much for sharing so much valuable information, with our watchers and our listeners.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on board.
Cool. Thank you, Kelley, and take care, everyone.
Thank you.